Alex read your book, and Alex's significant other read your book.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Alex is someone who shares books.
I do.
I've shared my book with lots of people. Hello and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. This is a show for business professionals who want to raise their game to the next level. So what we want to do is have conversation about the kinds of conversations that are difference making. We are fortunate to be blessed with a guest today. His name is Patrick Galvin, and he is a two-time author. His first book was called The Connector's Way. His second book, The Trusted Way, a story about building a life and a business of character. Alex Brown and I welcome you, Patrick Galvin, to Conversations About Conversations.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here.
I want to tell our audience a little bit about your background. You have personally reached out to me, which I am very grateful for. You are the chief galvanizing officer of your company, the Galvanizing Group. You're a professional speaker. You've done a Tedx talk. You have now 2 books, and we're just delighted to have you here today.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Our last conversation was fun. I expect this one will be too.
Alex, you've been dying to ask some questions. Would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, I would. So when I picked up the book, I was reflecting on it actually with Ivan before you joined us, and I said, you know what I love about this book is if you look in the library, my home library, all the books are like this thick. This book is a quick read. I actually read it now 1.5 times, and what I like about that is you could read it fairly quickly if you're a reader, and you can bookmark a couple key concepts. And one of the concepts that we have around this house, and we've got 3 kids, is we always tell the kids, no one's going to judge you for falling down. It's rather how quickly you get back up. And I kept coming back to that concept or thing that we tell our children. Your book, I mean, it's almost like the character in it has to hit this down, he trips, he falls, and it takes him a while to acknowledge that he's fallen, right?
Yep. And there's some missteps along the way.
Yeah, some missteps along the way, but I find it incredibly compelling because you didn't just paint a picture of here's how to be trusted. You took a real world scenario and said, here are the steps and here's what actually happened. And so it made it very believable and very relatable. How did you get to the spot where you're like, yeah, I need to tell this story?
Well, this is the second book, as Ivan mentioned. And the first book, The Connector's Way, is about relationship building. So that book's been out 5 years. It's gotten me out in the world speaking. I've had a chance to go back to companies and kind of hear how they've put the tactical ideas in that book into practice. And invariably, the people who are the most successful in relationship building, who can extract from a parable on relationship building, extract ideas and put them into place and see them work, are those who have a solid foundation of trust. And in The Connector's Way, I kind of tangentially touched on trust in some of the dialogues and some of the characters, but I didn't hit it head on. I am now talking to people about this book and they say, well, do I need to read The Connector's Way first? And I'm saying, well, it kind of depends. I think for some people, they would benefit more from reading The Trusted Way because it's a foundation. With that foundation of trust, relationship building is organic. It's going to be successful. It's going to work. But if you just start relationship building and doing these things that you might learn in a seminar, by your boss or through YouTube or whatever, it just is oftentimes perceived as sort of tactical manipulation. But if you start with a solid foundation of trust, then you can bring in things that make sense for your personality, your business, what have you. So I realized that I needed to tell the tale of trust in a way that would engage people, just like The Connector's Way has engaged people, without being pedantic. And what I saw was an opening because most of the books about trust are somewhat academic, dry, hard to follow, too long. To your point, Alex, that you liked that it was short. Both of my books can be read in 90 minutes. The audio on The Connector's Way is 1:45. The audiobook version of The Trusted Way is 1:48. That's intentional. People don't have time for long periods with a book, and I'm grateful when they can spend 90 minutes with me.
How long did it take you to write the second book?
Well, it's been 5 years between books. Once I decided I was going to write on trust, it flows very quickly. For me, writing is, I had debated a couple of different topics, and then I was thinking about, well, what would be a good sequel to The Connector's Way? And I realized that it had to be about trust. And once I made that decision, I think this is about a three-month writing effort. The advantage of writing fiction versus nonfiction is the characters in The Trusted Way are based on real people. And some of them I've changed very little aside from their names. Sadly, I know some people like the main character who has to fall from grace. So I could think about their stories and think about the things I'm going to pull out based on the lessons I want to teach. But it is, for me, way easier writing fiction than nonfiction because your mind is your library that you draw upon, and you don't have to worry about cross-checking and all the references and what have you that you need to do in a nonfiction book.
Well, and you can give advice in a different way because it's not like, here's my 10 bullet points of advice. You can kind of weave it into the story, and then people can identify with what they want to identify versus do I agree with this point? Yes, no. This point? Yes, no. So
right.
I'm hearing that because you've got me thinking about, because of course I'm looking at you as someone who I would consider a role model for where I want to take my business.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, I guess maybe my second book could be a parable as well.
Yeah. I think there are not enough. And parables have a long tail. Parables will last a long time and they build slowly. So I'm not as concerned about my sales in year one. I'm not at all concerned about my sales in year one because parables are passed along. And The Connector's Way, it was one person passing along my book a year after it came out that had it take off. We've sold over 40,000 copies now. It's in China and Chinese. And I know that this will have the same trajectory. And I know that they could read this book 20 years from now and it's still as true in the future as it will be now, because trust is something that is essential to our success. And sadly, I think trust is going to be a challenge for people in business and politics and parenting, what have you. So it's something that I think they're going to be looking for a resource.
What has been the reception so far for the book?
Very good. Exciting. So I do have a universe of buyers for this that I didn't have for the first book, because folks who like The Connector's Way are going to read this. So that's been great. The other thing that's been super exciting for me is something that is near and dear to both Alex and myself, which is Rotary International. Rotary International is an organization of 1.2 million. And the four-way test is something that Rotarians have been exposed to greater or lesser degrees, depending on their years in with the organization, their club, and how they utilize it. But it's something that's part of a conversation, but I'm coming at it in a totally new way. There's never been a parable written about the four-way test. The four-way test has been around since 1932. It was started by a guy during the Great Depression when his company was on the verge of collapse. He took over as president and he couldn't compete on price because he had cut prices to the bone. He couldn't compete on product quality or on product range because his competitors had more. But there was a lot of corner cutting going on in the 1930s when companies were just trying to survive. And he said, well, I want to create an ethical standard that could allow my company to rise above the competition, being the most trustworthy in the cookware industry, which was his industry. So he came up with this thing on his own. He thought trust and ethics, it was too obtuse for most people. So he came up with these 4 principles of the things that we think, say, and do, which is kind of the subtitle to the four-way test. 24 words, so not quite a tweet, a little bit longer. The first is it the truth? Second principle is it fair to all concerned? The third principle is, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And the fourth is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? So what he started doing was using that himself for 60 days. He had such success with it that he gave it to his team. Long story short, he turned his company around, paid back his personal loan that he made to the company. He got the company profitable. And when he became a Rotary International president, he actually deeded the copyright of the four-way test to Rotary. And then it was passed around the world. And there are some big companies today that have the four-way test as its guiding principle. Walgreens, for instance, has the four-way test as its guiding principle for making decisions at the C level. So it's well known in certain circles, but it's absolutely unknown in the vast majority of business circles or professional circles. And I would argue that it is as relevant today as it was in 1932. And maybe you could argue more necessary, because I think we're in this trust-challenged age. So I want to bring it back to relevance with this story.
My question would be, do you remember personally, this may have been years ago, I don't know, when you actually had the four-way test and you had to apply it in your own personal life and you went, aha, like a light bulb moment? Did that happen to you, or was it over time it started to sink in and then you wrote the book later?
Well, it kind of retroactively happened. So I joined Rotary in 2012 and I saw the 4-way test and I started thinking about it. And I realized that I wish I had seen it about 10 years earlier when we started our company. At the time, we were focused on marketing services. And there was a business that asked if we could help them out. And honestly, they were our first real great prospect. I mean, somebody who could pay a good monthly retainer. And we were excited. And it was a nutraceutical company. They made vitamins and other health-related products. And they had this miracle vitamin that was going to cure all the ills that you could possibly imagine. And we asked for data, and they sent us, various studies that had been done. And the studies were terrible, like sample size of 7 or sample size of 20. And just, it read like marketing copy, not like science. It was clearly not the truth. I mean, it was just over the top marketing. And I'm not proud to admit this. I struggled with saying no because we needed revenue. If I had the 4-way test, I could have gone down each one of those 4 principles I just described and said, nope, 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 and gone to sleep that night having rejected them because that was the right business decision. But instead, it took me 2 weeks to come to that conclusion that just didn't feel right. But feeling right and knowing right are 2 different things. So yeah, since then, since seeing the 4-way test, I've run other clients through that checklist of 4 things and rejected some. And it was very easy to do. So once again, that's the power of it, is it gives you, it's a guide, it's a yardstick that I think is very, very useful for business decisions, for personal decisions.
Now, the first book, The Connector's Way, is a story about an insurance professional developing their business. And it wound up being very popular with realtors, right?
And mortgage people.
Yeah. Now, this book is kind of more like along the startups and startup managers, and it could wind up being very popular with who? Who do you think? Where do you think it goes?
I don't know. Funeral directors? I have no idea. The funny thing is, books have these weird paths, and I never intended it, and never intended the first one to be popular with mortgage, and it was in real estate. So trust is such a universal topic that it really is going to depend more on some randomness of who those influencers are going to be for the book. I know they're out there. They don't even know the book exists yet, but they will. And 1 or 2 of them are going to be strong in a certain industry. And then one thing leads to another. It's fascinating. I wish I could predict it and answer that question. You put something good out there and things will fall into place, especially if it's a universally themed item that doesn't have a timestamp on it. So I'll be curious to know what the answer is to that question. I honestly do not know. So many professional service firms have the word trust as either part of their marketing, in their tagline. So, okay, you got it in there. How often do you talk about it? And here's a book that speaks to this and will hopefully initiate an internal conversation. So I think it's going to be professional services, and I think it'll be likely to be an industry that uses bandies around the word trust, but really hasn't delved into it deeply enough. That's my kind of big picture prediction.
I always laugh at the companies with trust or integrity or something in their name, because having dealt with the time that I was in mortgages, there were a lot of mortgage companies with integrity or trust and there were a lot of things that would not have passed the 4-way test in their business efforts. And so it was kind of ironic. Of course, we have the local store here, Patrick, of course, you're also in the Portland area, called Fairly Honest Bills. And I'm like, that's truth and label.
That's great. I wasn't familiar with that name. I love it.
Yeah. Like
Fairly Honest.
kind of trustworthy mortgage, but you're not going to, or sometimes trustworthy.
4-way testish.
Yeah, 4-way testish.
You've mentioned a couple of times that there are not a lot of parable business books out there, but it seems so natural for you to have written 1, now 2, and I'm guessing maybe more.
There's a 3rd. It's a trilogy.
Okay. What is the final episode going to be?
It's that. So that's the thing. I can't say because I'm not 100% sure, but I do know it's going to be it's going to be one of the essential aspects of relationship building. And I think we're going to saw it off after 3. And then what's nice about it is then we can put them all together in one book. So they're relatively small books. So we'll have a third book come out, and then a couple of years after that, we're going to have them all, bound together as a set. But it's all in the theme of relationship building. And I think a lot of parablists tend to wander all over the place in terms of what they write about. Business parablists, we're definitely focused.
What makes it a parable versus just a story?
Well, so a parable, probably the most famous parables are biblical and some other from other religious traditions. So stories don't necessarily have lessons. They could be entertaining, they could be exciting, but a parable, you're really drawing out lessons from the story. So it's a story with a purpose is a parable. That's my definition of it.
Closing statement time. Alex, would you like to make a brief closing statement?
My brief statement is I think that this book, and hearing your perspective now and hearing that you're a parabolist and how you connect positively with so many people, and then you're tying in this framework that Rotary has built since the 1930s. What to me stands out is it's going to be iconic. It's going to stand the test of time. It doesn't really matter what technology changes or what politics come and go. This parable, I think that you're laying the foundation of the book on, is one that I personally found the hard way. I was going to do a business deal, and I remember the day I said it doesn't meet the four-way test. I picked up the phone, called the president of Rotary, and said I got to pass on this deal at work. And I remember saying, the first time I applied it, right? I had studied it, I had said it, I had rehearsed it, I had to learn it to be a member, but it didn't mean anything to me.
Wow, that's powerful.
First time, I got to be very candid here, by the way, and it's a confession. I don't think without the four-way test I would have walked, because it was just a lot of money.
I love that story. And I think that's where it goes beyond just words into practice. And I don't think enough Rotarians, and outside of Rotary, I don't think enough people have that yardstick. So we're fortunate in Rotary that we have a yardstick to use. But just because it exists doesn't mean it's applied. So sharing your story at your club and with new folks who come into the organization, that's going to, I hope, have power over them to get them to think about it when they face a similar situation.
And I want to thank you for writing the book. Thank you.
Well, thank you. These are great questions, guys. The time has flown by. I just really appreciated the chance to talk with you.
Your closing statement, Patrick?
I think people are oftentimes looking for the silver bullet in terms of what it's going to take to be successful, and they'll try to buy it. So in the Connectors way, I talk about the main character going out and believing in, going to seminars, getting the answers, investing in marketing and advertising. He doesn't have enough money. He doesn't know what he can do. And I think we can overcomplicate business and our own personal lives. We're looking for, what's the right way to be successful? What's the right formula? And I think if we just think about, what is the right way to be? What is it to be of good character, internally and externally? How we think about ourselves, how we treat others. If we can really say, okay, that's the focus, and then we find things, whether it's the four-way test from Rotary, whether there's something called the trust equation, which is also very interesting. There's, the 7 rules from the Connectors Way. These are all helpful, but they don't work unless you kind of are in that space where it's not a silver bullet. It's really like improving yourself and being of right character, that the right decisions are going to flow. And I think a lot of times we're worried about the actions and less about the internal sort of motivating force.
I want to thank both of you for being a part of this important conversation about trust, connecting, doing the right thing. Thank you both for being part of this conversation about conversations.
Oh, thank you. It's fun. Appreciate it, Ivan. Nice meeting you, Alex.
Yeah, nice meeting you too.